Yeah, okay. Well, welcome to Google Hangout. Today, and of course, I'm your Member of Provincial Parliament, Sherry DeNovo. Today, we're in the heart of the whole riding of Parkdale High Park, and that's in the midst of High Park. Out the windows, you can't see it from your vantage point, but out the windows, we're looking at High Park just about to erupt into cherry blossom season. So it's actually quite gorgeous. And Grenadier Cafe has been here forever. And it's really the only restaurant in High Park. It's a great place to eat. It's very reasonable. I absolutely suggest you pop in here if you can find a seat. It's pretty busy, and remember, this is during the week midday, so it's a pretty busy place, but run by a fabulous family who also run the little concession stand and who are very involved in this community. So I want to give a shout out to them as well. Today, of course, it's all about the budget. Yesterday, the budget was tabled. And so I'm going to respond. Many of you have already heard Andrea Horvath, the leader of the New Democratic Party, coming out this morning and saying we are not going to support the budget. Absolutely not. And she was peppered with questions. I'm going to deal with some of those questions and what I have to say about the budget. But just to begin, the key issues here are, I would say, and remember, I'm a United Church minister, ethicality. Can someone or a government keep their promises? Last budget cycle, we negotiated with the Liberal ruling party for about 5 items. Let's talk about the top 3. Number 1 was jobs, youth jobs in particular. There are no jobs out there, and if you have a young person living in your basement who should be able to live on their own, you know what I'm talking about. There are no jobs. So we won that negotiation. They agreed to put money into jobs creation. Hey, hi Mona, I'm saying hi to some folk here. And so Mona, by the way, if you have any questions, you can ask me directly. This is live, so so just meeting some friends at Grenadier Cafe. So, bottom line, they promised us that. They promised us also a 5-day wait time for home care. There are some 61,000 people across Ontario waiting on wait lists for home care that don't get it and who need to get out of hospitals and get home, etc. They promised us that. They promised us reduction in auto insurance, as you remember, slight increase in ODSP and OW. These were all promises. And by the way, a financial accountability office. Here's the problem. They haven't kept any of those promises. And those were only 5. And they were very, very doable. We didn't ask outrageous demands of this government. We knew they'd say no. We asked reasonable demands last time, 5 reasonable demands. They couldn't accommodate us. There is no financial accountability office. There certainly is no 5-day home care wait. I mean, there may be pockets where this is happening, but overall it's not. The insurance companies won again, friends. Even though they got about $2 billion from this government, they didn't deliver any savings to your auto insurance, probably about 5% at best across the province. And jobs. Again, if you know youth that are out of work, you know that this jobs creation program, where did the money go? Again, we don't know. We would have known perhaps if the Financial Accountability Office had been up and running, but again, none of that really happened. They did give an increase to OW and ODSP, what we asked for, but that's about the only place that came through. So in that context, this budget that makes 70 different promises is absolutely unbelievable. So there's that. And why is it unbelievable? Well, it's not only that the budget is based on past experience. You know, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. Same for governments in terms of the number of promises, but in terms of the scandals that, of course, have surrounded this government. A government that fudged documents, according to the OPP, around the gas plant moves to save 5 Liberal seats, who's being still investigated, by the way, by the Ontario Provincial Police for criminal wrongdoing in terms of eradicating hard drives, etc. on that file. A government that was responsible for Orange, one of the bigger boondoggles in our history, huge amounts of money going out for not much return on that. E-health, again, a huge scandal I walked into. In fact, my very first days there, as I've said before, were days where, you know, 35 million went out the window. Colgate, it was called, just end-of-year dumping of funds. We've had some evidence, by the way, that that's still going on. And then just in this last week alone, we had evidence that the Herb Gray Parkway is unsafe, and they knew it, girder issues and other issues. that we had to get through Freedom of Information documents. That's come to light. A kickback scandal involving cleaning of cabinet ministers' homes. I mean, come on. Using government funds to clean their own homes and kickback to cleaning establishments. This is all documented. This is all in the press. This is the government that we then are supposed to turn around and believe are going to keep 70 promises when they couldn't keep 3. So that is the critical issue. As Andrew Horvath said this morning, why should we believe they can build a raft when they couldn't build a ship? This is critical. But I want to go into some of the areas that they've made promises in and really dissect them a little bit more clearly. First of all, I've dealt with the overriding and overarching issues that we have in this government, and the number one issue is credibility. Oh, by the way, the other credibility issue is in the figures themselves. The revenue streams are a pipe dream. The revenue streams for several years down the road, which nobody can predict at the best of times, a clear and utter pipe dream. We still don't know where much of the money is coming to fund any of these 70 promises. So that's part of the problem. And by the way, it's a 10-year plan. Nobody tables budgets for 10 years. Most of the promises made in this budget would mean that we would have to not wait till after the next general election to see any of them come to fruition. And again, if you believe that, I've got some promising land for you in Detroit, because this is patently absurd. First of all, let's talk about healthcare. In this budget, there's very little. And again, remember, our healthcare promise that we extracted from them has not been met. So we still don't have a 5-day guarantee. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario has come out and called this an austerity budget, just for interest's sake, because really the healthcare budget has been flat-lined. Again, just to remind folks a little bit of history, this is the government that made you pay for ambulances, that made you pay for eye exams, that made you pay for chiropractic, that weren't in place before. And they followed the Conservative government, so think about that. Healthcare has been flatlined. There is no increases to our hospital budgets, and I know I'm going to hear from our hospitals on this, because you can imagine it's been flatlined for a long, long time, and they already fundraise, spend half their time fundraising. There's very little more they can do with the current envelope, so that's healthcare. Schools, again, really what you're looking at, despite what you see in the print that sounds like more money is coming into, say, capital renovation, which we desperately need. I've actually fought with this government for increased funding for Swansea School and Keele Street and 1. We still are fighting for Runnymede. Well, I'm sorry to say, folks, that this government does not promise you any more funding than you already have. In fact, over a 10-year span, again, 10 years, it's a joke, it's actually a slight decrease. So that's capital investment in our schools and in our healthcare. And again, I remind you, this is week-old news that children with special needs are spending a lot of their time at home. They're being sent home because they don't have the staff to pay for it. It's actually interesting. I'm just seeing a beautiful red cardinal right out the window. Gorgeous. Oh, it just flew into the window. Anyway, the joys of Grenadier Cafe and sitting in the Grenadier restaurant. Labor. We're hearing mixed signals about the budget from our labor leaders, but let me tell you what's actually in the budget. In the budget is absolutely no labor reform. Let me repeat that. Absolutely no labor reform, no changes to the Employment Standards Act, no changes whatsoever, despite what we've been asking for, despite we've been asking over the years in the New Democratic Party for anti-scam legislation, for card check certification, for union organizing. None of that is in this budget. Absolutely none. And in fact, OPSU and government workers right now are having a battle with this government around negotiation. So you should know that. And the very last day of the same day as the budget day, yesterday, I actually tried yet again to get my post-traumatic stress disorder bill passed, and that is presumed diagnosis for first responders, police, paramedics, and firefighters. It means that if they succumb to post-traumatic stress disorder, that it is assumed that they got that from work. I tried to get a unanimous consent. It did pass, of course, second reading, as you all know, and it was voted down by the Liberals and Conservatives. And not only voted down, but they yelled at me for even raising it with first responders in the House on First Responders Day. So here's to first responders. Sadly, you didn't get what you deserved yesterday. And for the firefighters who think they did, with some new cancers being added into that presumed diagnosis, Again, it was Andrew Horvath's bill that brought that about years ago. Sadly, folks, that's not going to kick in until 2017 either. So you would have had to vote not only for the Liberals once, but twice to even see that promise realized. So a sad day for first responders yesterday, even though it was the first responders day. PSWs, personal support workers, absolutely deserve a raise. We couldn't agree more on that. But this government, when you read the fine print, what do they get in a raise? They get $1.50 next year, not $4 as it's been reported. $1.50. That's what they get. If we had a living wage, this would be a moot point. $1.50 next year, and it's not again until subsequent years, until after a possible general election, that they get the rest. Childcare workers did get more money, and we fought for this. We fought for this in a couple of budgets back, and fought for this. And Andrew Calver will know this, that we were the ones that really put this on the table. The government has continued to put it on the table, and that's a good thing. Of course, we support that. We don't support them, and we don't support the budget. We do support that. This most salient detail to anyone who's concerned with social justice, to anyone who's concerned with any of these envelopes, be it healthcare, labor, education, housing, which I'll get to in a moment, the plight of those who live on the margins, any of those issues, if they are your major concern, I can let you know that we do not have that reflected in this budget. This is not a social justice New Democratic Party budget, no matter what you read. Why do I say that? Turn to about the middle of the book if you're reading the budget. And in fact, I don't even have to direct you to the document itself. You could have listened to Glenn Murray, who was apparently on CBC crowing about the fact that we are 10th out of 10 in Canada. That is the 10th out of 10. We are the worst in relations to per capita spending on our citizens. That's for everything. So if you're concerned with infrastructure investment, for transit investment, for any of those portfolios or envelopes, you get less of it spent on you than anywhere else in Canada. So remember those two figures, folks. 10 years to implement any of these promises, and we're 10th out of 10 in terms of per capita funding. So this, for sure, is not a NDP or social justice budget. More to the point, one of the reporters had asked Andrea when she announced that we were not supporting it this morning, well, this is a budget Tommy Douglas would approve of. Absolutely not. In fact, to tell you about Tommy Douglas, he ran 17 balanced budgets. Tommy said about balanced budgets this. He said we should always be running balanced budgets. And remember, he brought in Medicare single-handedly in his province, because otherwise you're giving the people's money to the banks. Couldn't agree more. You need a balanced budget for that reason. We don't want to be paying interest rates to banks from your wallets. We don't want to do that. So there is importance in actually being fiscally responsible. And guess what? Again, counter to what you may have heard or read, the New Democratic Party is the most fiscally responsible party historically in place in provincial governments of all the parties. Tories come second, Liberals a distant third, with one exception. Guess what that exception was? Bob Rae, who I remind you is still a Liberal and became the leader of the Liberal Party. So that was the only instance where we did not make balancing budgets a priority, not on the backs of the poorest, not on the backs of people, but a priority simply because to do anything else is to risk your money. And that is very different, by the way, from an austerity budget, very different. So absolutely you need to invest to see a return. Transit, it's a file that's near and dear, I know, to everyone in Parkdale High Park's hearts and to others across the province and across the city. If you live in the city of Toronto, you will know that you could fill a room with transit promises from one government or another. As I said, when everybody was promising a subway to Scarborough in one of the last by-elections, I said, believe it when you ride it, because it ain't going to happen. I stand by those words. Of course, you've got the Tories who filled in subways that were to be built. You've got the Liberals promising, and never actually building anything. That is the legacy, the horrible legacy of transit in the city. You see no help for the TTC in the city. And by the way, if you live in Parkdale High Park or any of the 5 ridings bordering the air rail link, guess what wasn't in the budget? No promise of any money to electrify that air rail link, despite what Glenn Murray, the transportation minister, tweeted out, that he was promising electrification by 2017. I was horrified and disappointed. I can't describe in words strong enough that this was not reflected in the budget. So what we were afraid of, yes, my friends, has come to pass. This government will not deliver an electrified air rail link that will actually then deliver transit to this riding and other ridings in the city. They're putting this huge infrastructure project in for a 2-week sporting event, the Pan Am Games in 2015, and yet this infrastructure project is not going to tie into the Toronto Transit Commission's projects at all. It's not going to be able to get people from A to B to get to work. A ridiculous use of taxpayers' money. Again, Metrolinx, who ran ads, by the way, during the Super Bowl, so that's how they're using your money, can't deliver on this, and the government has no intention on delivering this. So that's very clear. What else do they have no intention delivering? And this will shock you, because with a great ballyhoo, Glenn Murray announced a bike strategy. Yes, a bike strategy and a bike bill. By the way, towards the end of the session, with no help of getting to committee, no hope of getting through the process. And again, remember, this is a government that passed a bill attacking collective agreements with the Ellis Don bill on behalf of one of Canada's biggest construction firms. In fact, one of the world's biggest construction firms. That bill got passed in 2 weeks. So we know where there's a will, there's a way. Government could have moved this bill up. They did not. They didn't use any extra measures at their disposal to move this bill up. Instead, it's going the normal route, which would not have passed, which wouldn't have passed if we'd sat for another year. It would take months, really, to get this bill passed. Knowing full well, an incredibly cynical move, that it was not reflected in the budget at all. There is no money in the budget for cyclists. I'll repeat that. No money in the budget for cycling projects as the budget is written right now. So if you were counting on the 1 meter rule, if you were counting on extra bike paths, if you're counting on a bike strategy, a very simple thing that would, again, provide for some of these things, similar to what they have in Quebec. If you were counting on that, you're not going to see it reflected in this budget. Corporate taxes. How are we going to pay for this all? Well, we proposed in our transit strategy a modest increase in corporate taxes. Do we see a modest increase in corporate taxes in this budget? Absolutely not at all. We see an increase in personal taxes, but they're not going to pay for what we need them to pay for. We need payment. We need the corporations who have the job that the workers need to get to. We need them to step up. And there's no request for them to do so. In fact, they're giving them more money. They're giving them another over $1 billion so they can write off the HST on their gas tax, so they can write off the HST on entertainment. We've pleaded with them to talk to the federal government to rescind that promise to the corporations. They did not, and the budget shows that they don't see that as a priority at all. It's not there. It's not anywhere. If your concern is about the Ontario Municipal Board and the incredible burden it has become to community groups in the City of Toronto, you'll know that I tabled a bill, Rosario Marchese tabled a bill, all designed to limit the powers of the Ontario Municipal Board, an unelected, appointed body that can overrule community groups and the planning department of the City of Toronto. We have proposed reform to that body for as long as I've been elected, if not longer. Nothing about the OMB in this budget. And by the way, Liberals and Tories ganged up to bring the private members bill down. It was actually made it all the way to committee, and they killed it at committee. So it is not going forward. The last bill that the New Democratic Party tabled through Rosario is not going forward thanks to them. So you know whose side they're on, and there's no question. Development is good in many instances, but it's not good when the developers dictate all the policies of a government, and clearly that's what we have here. So again, nothing in this budget about inclusionary zoning, nothing in this budget about housing. Let me talk about housing for a minute. The promise in this budget is simply status quo, and status quo that's dependent on the federal government coming to the table and with matched funds. That means essentially the province is not going ahead with anything on its own where housing is concerned. So any tenants out there concerned about rent, concerned about anything to do with your rights as tenants, buildings built after the 90s, condos not being covered by any kind of rent control at all, well, rest assured, this budget is not going to help you. Tenants, people are concerned or waiting on affordable housing lists, of which we have 170 families or more waiting, that they're not going to get any relief from this budget. No relief whatsoever. Just going to check time here and check Twitter and see if there's any questions here. Forward. Um, Checking. By the way, in terms of response from our constituents, and I have been out, as you know, I've never stopped knocking on doors and getting to meet you directly. Response from this community has been, you know, absolutely expecting an election, absolutely concerned about the corruption that's been taking place at the government level and the waste, absolute waste, horrific waste of taxpayers' dollars at the government level. That's what I've been hearing at the door, even from former Liberal supporters. I have heard really from our constituents only a couple who are supporters who have said you've taken a wrong tact here. So that's what I'm hearing from people. I'm hearing from people, time's up. 11 years is time enough to deliver on all the promises you could ever want to make. They had a majority government, remember, for many of those 11 years, going into the 12th year, and people are finally waking up and getting that if they were serious about any of these issues that they've made in promises about in this budget, they would have already delivered. So that's what I'm hearing from constituents. That's what I'm hearing in terms of concerns. So just wanted to also, I don't have many moments left, and I have a wonderful salad left to eat. Looking through here. Um, a lot of people saying, "Yay, way to the races! Fantastic time! Their time's up," as they're saying, of course, on this Liberal government. But I was going to get to events. Let's get to events. Still getting used to touchscreen. Here we go. Okay, so this evening, Parkdale Collegiate's 125th anniversary, which is pretty exciting. They're the second oldest collegiate in Toronto, next to the one that I went to, which is Jarvis Collegiate. Even older, but yay to Parkdale. Show up. There's going to be events all weekend, and I'll talk to you about those. There is a Jane's Walk tonight, which is a walk as workout. Meet at the Etienne Brûlé Park. So that's tonight. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be at the Tibetan Canadian Centre Gala Dinner at the Tibetan Canadian Centre, and that's out on Titan Road. So happy to be there and support Tibetans. Again, we had the first Tibet Day, not first Tibet, third Tibet Day at the government buildings on last Thursday. Where are we? Thursday, losing track of time here. Fabulous event, wonderful Tibetan food, lots of turnout from our MPPs and staffers at Queen's Park, and again highlighting the sorry state of affairs in Tibet, still of course under occupation, horrendous occurrences, over 127 I believe now. Folk have self-immolated in protest against the regime there. Now we hear news on the front that Tibetan women and Tibetans are not allowed to speak their language, not allowed to have pictures of His Holiness the Dalai Lama up on their walls. That has become even worse. Now they're forcing Tibetan women to actually marry Han Chinese. It's outrageous what's going on. Journalists are not allowed into the country. So if you meet a Tibetan as you're walking around Parkdale High Park, and you will if you're in South Parkdale, because we have one of the largest communities anywhere outside of Nepal, say hello and say you're holding them in your prayers because you need to. So Tibetan Gala, that's going to be tomorrow night. And again, just going back to events, also more Jane's Walk. It's Jane's Walk weekend. We have a Jane's Walk in Swansea, meeting at Swansea Town Hall, same night. We have, again, more celebrations for the Parkdale Collegiate Institute, 125th anniversary at the Liberty Grand. We have a memorial service for Jonathan Jenkins. That's happening in my riding, by the way. Queen's Park reporter, died way too young, cancer, 51 years old, I believe, and that's going to be happening in the riding if you knew Jonathan. Jane's Walk, History of Hunger, that's going to be starting at Parkdale Activity and Recreation Centre. There's a May sale at Humbercrest United Church, and that's going to happen tomorrow as well. Going into Sunday, we have a Jane's Walk. It's starting at the Roncesvalles Review Theatre, fabulous theatre. If you haven't been to the Review, let me tell you, it's the only Review theatre owned by the community that we know of in Canada, maybe in North America, but certainly in Canada. And we kept that going. I was part of the the initial surge to do that when we knew the building was going to be sold. And kudos to all the incredible volunteers. I went to a volunteer celebration party. It was wonderful. They all got to walk the red carpet. That was fun. What else is happening? On Sunday, Polish Constitution Day flag raising, which is a ceremony at Queen's Park on the front lawn. And again, more Parkdale Collegiate anniversaries, brunches, and closing ceremonies. The Friendly Spike Theatre Band is going to be outside of CAMH on Queen Street, talking about the walls, doing a theatre presentation, which is pretty exciting. And Jane's Walk, Bloor, which is a century development and heritage, meeting on Bloor West Village, talking about the OMB fight there. Coming up next week. Okay, we'll leave that. Not a lot of community events during the week. People have asked too about, so what's going to happen now? Well, really the ball is in the government's court now. I can tell you that the writ to start an election has to be dropped on a Wednesday. So it's either going to be this next Wednesday. That's entirely up to the government, Liberal government. Either this Wednesday, in which case the election would be on or around June 5th, or a week next Wednesday, which would be the 12th, which would mean, or the 14th, which would mean the election would be the 12th of June. So either of those dates is when the election will be. So there's no doubt we're in campaign mode. Again, if there are any questions you have, personal questions, any concerns that you have, please tweet them to me at CHERIDINOVO or Facebook. Again, the same, CHERIDINOVO. I'll try to keep the Google Hangouts going from the campaign trail to always keep in touch with you. So keep in touch with me. Let me know what you're thinking. Your opinions are incredibly valuable to me. And look forward, if you haven't seen me recently at your door, to seeing me at your door. In fact, I'm going to be knocking on doors this afternoon, so maybe I'll be knocking on yours. Let me know what you think. I always try to get back to people within 24 hours if you have concerns, always and directly. And again, I really appreciate your support in the past. And just to say again, what a privilege and honor it has been to serve you now 8 years in Parkdale High Park, 3 elections later, still rocking on and still loving this incredible place. Thanks to the Grenadier for hosting this. Thank you to High Park for we're trying to protect it, by the way, and prevent condo developments from completely encasing it. We do not want that. We want some space around High Park. That's very important for the wildlife that inhabits this park, and it's very important for our environment. If you can come down to see the cherry blossoms, they will be blooming shortly. But if you come down, do not climb the trees and don't cut off branches. Please do not do that. That destroys the branches for future generations. But do come down if you haven't. It's spectacular, and it actually will be happening just outside these windows in Grenadier Cafe. So do take part in High Park. It's a great gift, not just us, the entire province. I mean, this is where a lot of people who aren't rich enough or lucky enough to have cottages, this is their cottage. This is where they come to go down to Grenadier Pond, to ride on the pond, to walk through the woods, to get lost and have fun. So my message to you is keep on trucking. Happy to work for you. Don't believe everything you read in the mainstream media. Always said that. But do let me know what you're thinking. Okay? Signing off. Always a pleasure. Take care. Talk to you soon.